My name is Alan Scott, and I'm the author of the Storm series, which currently consists of 3 novels and 3 books of short stories. Today I'm going to read the prelude to the first book, Echoes of a Storm. You'll have to excuse me, I'm not an actor and I'm certainly not a voice artist, but hopefully it won't be too monotone and you will be able to enjoy it. Echoes of a Storm by Alan Scott. The prelude. Rain. Her softly falling tears echoed the rain as she watched him walk away. He did not cry, but then life had made him forget how. So in the gentle rain just past midnight, she found herself crying for a man, a fool, who could not. A fool with that deeply irritating mocking smile. But then she thought sadly, who was he mocking? Himself? The world? Both? Even after all these years, she could never quite work out which. She continued to watch him, his slight limp giving him a very instinctive walk as he finished crossing the courtyard and exited through the open gate. He was in many ways a nondescript man, average height, average weight, and looked to be anywhere between 30 and 40 with short brown hair. His clothes were plain as he was. An involuntary shudder ran through her body. He may seem plain and nondescript, but she knew what lurked within him, what hid beneath the facade he presented to the world. As she thought about him, the events of this terrible evening arose in her mind. One moment she was entertaining her guests, the next men with swords had come crashing in. They'd been screaming, shouting, fire, smoke, running, and of course death. Somehow her daughter, carried on her maid's arm, a wounded guard, and herself had made it to the walled courtyard with the assassins close behind. She remembered her hope of escape turned to ash upon seeing the courtyard gates locked and barred. Hence, filled with growing despair, she had turned to face her attackers as they circled in for the kill. Then, from the dark shadows that surrounded the walls of the courtyard, he had appeared as if from nowhere. All eyes had turned to him, and there was a moment of perfect silence, which was violently broken as a primeval growl, which could never come from any human throat, sounded out and echoed throughout the courtyard. Moments later, all of our attackers were dead, and then the rain had gently started to fall. Afterwards they talked. Apparently the plot had only been discovered in the early evening. One of her cousins had hired the men, bribed one of the guards to let them in. Her cousin's plan was not a simple one, though. There had been a nasty twist, a twist that had forced a bitter choice. Fresh tears mixed with the rain as she remembered asking her saviour why he had made the choice he had. She had watched the softness in his deep blue eyes, which had slowly crept in over the last 2 years, wither and die, to be replaced by the familiar harshness from years long past. Duty, was his single word reply. Then she had made plans, hasty plans. Now in the early hours of a new day, in the gentle rain, something dangerous had left the country house. He had names, many names. Redclaw, the Midnight Man, and more. However, she knew him as Nathaniel West, her bodyguard. By sending her bodyguard out into the night, these hastily drawn plans were being put into action. Her foolish cousin, Frederick, had started it, but others would follow. Others would now enter the game. Why did people call it a game? Well, it was more than a game to her. It was the life of her daughter. It was the future of her realm. It was friends lying dead in the house behind her. Friends who'd been alive only hours earlier. She would show them all. There was nothing she would not sacrifice to protect her daughter and the realm. Let them play their little games. Tonight she would show them how the great game was truly meant to be played. Nathaniel had vanished from sight by now. So Queen Alexandra turned to face the only other survivors, her maid Mary, who was walking towards her with a cloak, and the wounded guard who held her daughter Kathleen in her arms. As Mary wrapped the cloak around the Queen's shoulders, she whispered, "He is gone then?" "Yes." "So it has started?" "Yes." It is back?" Mary looked into Mary's quizzical face and nodded slowly. Turning her eyes to the guard, she asked, "His name?" "Jack Sorensen." Moving past Mary and wiping the tears from her eyes, Queen Alexandra headed towards Jack Sorensen so that she could take her daughter in her arms. Mary looked out into the dark beyond the county house walls. He would be walking, running, heading towards his goal, and with each step he would be reverting back to what he was. The last 2 years would be wiped out. Mary stifled a sob and closed her eyes. Turning her head to the sky, she let the rain wash across her face. The rain always hid her tears so well. Nathaniel walked out of Count Frederick's country house and turned his head up into the refreshing rain. The Queen had decided he was to make a clear and precise message to the world by making an example of Count Frederick. So clear would this message be that no one else would dare make an assassination attempt. A hasty decision, a decision she would later regret, no doubt. But he was the Queen's man, and he did as he was commanded. Turning his head back towards the house, he studied his handiwork. There, nailed to the main gates, were Count Frederick, his wife, and his 2 small sons. Behind them, not a living thing was left. He had killed everything. The fire that was just taking hold in the main part of the house would run unchecked and reduce the house to a ruinous state. A clear and precise message, if there ever was one. Thinking back over the night's events, Nathaniel soon realised how easy it had been to slip back into the old ways. It was almost as if the last 2 years had never happened. There had been a moment, though, when he had felt an overwhelming sense of pain and loss. That was when he had told his tale to Alexander, but he could not afford those emotions. Nathaniel snorted and gave a short, hard laugh. The price would be high if he ever gave in to them. His eyes hardened and his mouth curled into a cruel, mocking smile. To be what people wanted him to be, to do what he needed to do, he'd have to become the old Nathaniel West again. The last 2 years would have to be forgotten. Yet, how could he forget? Phil, Nathaniel berated himself. Turning his head back towards the early morning sky, he let the rain wash across his face. He did always enjoy the rain. It always brought him peace. Okay, now for the boring bit. No part of this publication may be produced, stored in retrieval systems, or transported in any forms or by any means, electronic, mechanical, photocopying, recording, or otherwise without prior permission of the author. What I have just read is a work of fiction. All characters, events portrayed in what I have just read are fictional, and any resemblance to people real or instance is purely coincidental. I hope you've enjoyed what you've just listened to. I will be putting the preludes from most of my books, hopefully, on YouTube, with me narrating them. And if I get a